I think legal tech is one of the most fragmented software industries I've ever seen. When I was looking at the industry as an investor, thinking about do I want to go into legal tech, what I saw really confused me. I saw a lot of vendors that were software driven. So matter management vendors, billing vendors, legacy contract management players. And then I saw these AI vendors on the other side that, super sophisticated technology, e-discovery vendors, and contract due diligence vendors, mostly in the M&A space for due diligence. But there was not really vendors that were combining software and AI. And so the question to me was, why is that? Because if you go into adjacent industries like fintech and regtech, those vendors combine software with AI. It's only in legal tech where we see such a large split.
I'm Chad Main, and this is Technically Legal, a podcast about the intersection of technology and the practice of law, where in each episode we'll talk to a legal innovator about what they've been up to and hopefully get some real-world tips from them that lawyers can implement in their practices. In today's episode, we talk to Evisort founder Jerry Ting about his AI-fueled contract analysis app and also about looking beyond legal tech for inspiration and for customers. We also talk to the founder of Rain & Court, Andy Klein. Rain & Court is a secure services automation platform for law firms. A consistent theme you're going to hear throughout this episode is that our guest, Jerry Ting, seems to always have a foot in legal, but is always looking outside legal to improve what he's doing. As an undergrad at the University of Southern California, Jerry worked a little while at Yelp, but ultimately enrolled at Harvard Law. It was at Harvard where he hatched the idea for his startup, Evisort, which is an AI-powered contract management system. Although Evisort is a legal tech product, it was at Harvard that Jerry started looking beyond the legal industry to accomplish his goals. He looked for help outside of Harvard Law and went to the business school where Evisort was accepted into the business school's innovation lab.
I actually had started a startup project when I was an undergrad. I went to undergrad at USC in LA. And the project there was, so my dad's an immigrant from Taiwan, but he has his own business in the US. So he's always writing letters and he's making spelling mistakes. And what I did was I worked with my roommates in undergrad to write a program that could basically fix spelling and grammar. Think about Grammarly before Grammarly. That's really when I started learning about natural language processing. I went to work at Yelp in business development before law school and was the first person to open an account with a Chinese restaurant in Canada for all of Yelp.
What year is this?
This was 2014.
Okay.
So I was at Yelp in the San Francisco downtown office. That's where I cut my teeth on working with clients. And then I took the LSAT, did pretty well on it, so went off to Harvard Law School. I was a 1L. And I was looking at the big law track and saying, okay, that's better for 2L, but what do I want to do for my first year summer? So I started talking to in-house counsel at all of the companies I look up to. I spoke to folks at Apple. I spoke to folks in big banks like Goldman in New York. I was looking at both New York and California as markets. And by just getting coffee with them, a lot of these were alumni of the law school. I started hearing very similar patterns. I would ask them, hey, what would it look like to intern in your office? What does it mean to be a junior person inside of an in-house legal department? Because I thought maybe I'll go to the law firm route, work with startups in one of the many sort of tech-focused law firms, and then go in-house to a tech company. And so I was talking to these in-house lawyers, and I realized that very simple technologies, not even AI-based, could bring a ton of value to these organizations.
So it was during the summer of between your first and second years, you thought, hey, maybe being a lawyer is not where I should focus, maybe
right.
Make a business?
So I actually have an interesting background when it comes to what I did in law school. I was having these conversations maybe 1-2 months in after arriving at law school. And I realized I'm hearing a lot of things that if I heard before I went to law school, maybe I would have reconsidered even becoming a lawyer at all. But what does that mean from an opportunities perspective? And so that first summer, I actually interned at BCG, where I was a consulting intern. So right off the bat, first summer in, was doing consulting. And then my second summer, I worked in a law firm and I also worked in banking. I was trying to test sort of all the different opportunities that I can have as a young professional. But as I went through consulting, banking, and law, I realized that the problems that we're seeing when it comes to being able to review data in contracts is not just a legal problem, but a problem that goes across multiple different verticals.
And so at what point in your law school career do you decide I'm gonna launch a tech company?
It was second semester, first year. I was working with the Harvard Law Entrepreneurship Project, That project, you actually, even as a first year student, you start working with clients under the mentorship of a licensed attorney. And so I was working with a partner from a law firm, helping entrepreneurs in the Boston area get started. And one individual stood out to me. His name was Ming Now. He was a PhD candidate at MIT, and he was building an automation solution for accounting. And so I went to Ming, I asked him for coffee. He was my client. I was helping him with some formation work. And I went to him and I said, what you're doing in the accounting space, I think is quite relevant in the legal space. Can you introduce me to somebody to just conduct a feasibility analysis? Is it even possible to do with AI some of the things that humans are doing right now in legal? And he's actually became my co-founder, wrote our first piece of code when I was a 1L.
So at some point then at law school, you decided, man, I'm not going to be a lawyer. I'm going to make this company, right?
Yeah.
You said you worked in the entrepreneurial project there with a law school, but then you got into the Harvard, like an incubator, correct?
Right.
Tell me about that.
It's a very special thing that Harvard has. I think it's one of the only schools in the world. It has a dedicated co-working space. And instead of being at the law school, it was actually at the business school. And so Harvard's put in millions of dollars to build out this very large facility, 3 floors, basically providing office space to student entrepreneurs. And they surround us with some of the best advisors in the world. Like right off the bat, I was able to meet with some very experienced, both entrepreneurs and venture capitalists. And so I was actually able to meet with some of the founding members of EMC, which later became a part of Dell for managing contracts. And that was actually when I was even just considering, do I want to build a company? And what I heard over and over again at this incubation lab, it's called the Harvard Innovation Lab, was that this is something that no one's done before. It's something that combines multiple different disciplines between software, AI, a little bit of process, and also working within a very mature industry like legal. But I think without the Harvard Innovation Lab, I could not have started my company. They gave us Amazon credits so that we can spin up our first servers. They gave us a desk space that we can go into and recruit our first couple employees. And they gave us a dedicated advisor who actually was the CEO of a publicly traded software company to work with us as an advisor. So they surrounded us with resources and really gave us a platform so that we can, even as students, begin building a really world-class company.
That's cool. And so it's affiliated with the business school, not the law school, but at the same time, you are still doing your legal studies, right?
I was enrolled at Harvard Law, but it was a balancing act between going to as many classes as I can and flying to New York, flying to California, meeting with clients. So it was a balancing act. But yes, I did take constitutional law and all the classes that you would take as a JD, and I got my degree.
And did you do the degree in the 3 years?
I did.
Wow, that's incredible. That's impressive. And the whole time you're working in the innovation lab, working on the app. What year of law school were you in when you started with the innovation lab?
It was the beginning of second year. So that summer after 1L, when I was at BCG, I filled out an application. And I said, hey, if I want to do this, I want to have all the resources to surround me. And so it was a very selective process. I think over 100 student groups applied, and Harvard selected a handful to allow into their, it's called the VIP program, the Venture Incubation Program. And we were very lucky that we got in. It was me, my co-founder, and then actually a classmate from section, who the 3 of us became the co-founders. And we went to the first kickoff meeting, I think 1 week into 2L, and we haven't looked back since.
It was at the Harvard Innovation Lab that things really started to gel for Jerry's Evisort idea. Although Jerry came up with the idea while he was still in college and before law school, it was at the Innovation Lab that the company really got off the ground.
I think legal tech is one of the most fragmented software industries I've ever seen. When I was looking at the industry as an investor, thinking about, do I want to go into legal tech? What I saw really confused me. I saw a lot of vendors that were software driven. So matter management vendors, billing vendors, legacy contract management players. And then I saw these AI vendors on the other side that, super sophisticated technology, e-discovery vendors, and contract due diligence vendors, mostly in the M&A space for due diligence. But there was not really vendors that were combining software and AI. And so the question to me was, why is that? Because if you go into adjacent industries like fintech and regtech, those vendors combine software with AI. It's only in legal tech where we see such a large split. And so that's where the new idea of Evisort came from, which is let's build a world-class software organization that has the workflows, has the reporting capabilities, is hyper secure, and is a centralized place to store all your documents at an enterprise level. But let's layer on the very sophisticated AI technology that we see in due diligence, that we see in e-discovery. Let's put the two together so that companies can actually run their businesses better. It's so interesting to me that companies in M&A will actually bring in a M&A contract due diligence vendor, analyze all that data, and then throw that data away, and then go through the merger and now say, hey, what's in our contracts? why not build an end-to-end solution? And so that's the broader vision for Evisort is combining AI and software so that we're not fragmented as an industry.
And how'd you come up with the name?
It was interesting. Evisort actually stands for evidence sorter because back in 2014, e-discovery was still more of a new industry. And so I thought, hey, that was interesting that lawyers have to go through so much evidence. I also was an intern at the Supreme Court in DC. And so I saw actual evidence being processed by the High Court. And I thought, wow, what a waste of paper.
Interestingly, Jerry's first idea for Evisort was not to use artificial intelligence to look at contracts, but to look at evidence used in the courtroom. However, he ultimately figured out that maybe using AI to look at contract clauses and help organize corporate documents may be the way to go.
Evisort is a AI-powered contract management system that removes the need for human data entry. So imagine if you took a paralegal, you trained him or her to read every clause of a contract. That person can read a contract that's 30 pages in 6 seconds and pull out all the relevant clauses on the legal side and on the business side. So you upload even a scanned PDF, call it a master services agreement into Evisort, and we can pull out over 30 different fields out of the box without any training by clients. And so we can pull out things like who's the party name, what's the expiration date, what's the indemnification clause, termination clause. And we can actually compare that against a standard playbook and say, hey, this indemnification clause is actually too aggressive. Perhaps consider renegotiating in the following ways. So it's meant to be an end-to-end AI system for the legal, procurement, and finance departments of companies.
And you say that the app works without training from the user, but then it sounds like, too, that if you want it to get more granular and do an analysis based on your own requirements, it can do that, too, right?
Absolutely. The hardest part in AI is being able to understand meaning behind words. And so that's where the AI component really kicks in. But once you pulled out a termination clause, some clients ask us, hey, I want to know every contract that has a termination for convenience, right? Or termination for cause. I want to do a report and split my contract data into 2 buckets. At that level, the clients can customize the software in an infinite number of ways because clients are always looking at different things from GDPR to insurance compliance to tracking vendor contracts.
And on the website before we met today, I did a little more digging on the app, and it looks like there's a lot of integrations with existing tools. Tell me about that.
That's, I think, a key differentiator between, I think, the current generation of AI companies in the legal tech space versus the legacy players. And it's so funny, in our industry, when I say legacy players, I mean companies over 7 years, right? The industry is changing so quickly that 7 years ago, AI vendors were deploying on-premise, right? And it was a large enterprise architecture sort of deployment. So in terms of integrations, what we can do is out of the box, we can integrate with Salesforce, we can integrate it with DocuSign, data rooms, Google Drive, Box, SharePoint. And what that means for our clients is that you don't actually need to change where you store your contracts. We can come in and work with your existing systems and provide an AI layer that sits on top of your existing infrastructure. So an example would be if legal wants to bring in Evisort, but they want to analyze sales documents and their sales team is using Salesforce, we can actually analyze the contracts that are inside of Salesforce and put that into Evisort so that legal teams can run their analysis, but the sales team might not even have to use Evisort.
That's interesting. So let's talk about that for a minute, just so conceptually I can get it. So let's say that my company is using Google.
Sure.
Let's say the sales team has a folder in Google Drive of whatever the agreements are, sales agreements, NDAs, whatever they are. So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, via an API, Evisort then just goes onto Google, under the drive there, does whatever analysis the client asks it to do, pumps that information back out to Evisort, and then gives you a result. Is that right?
That's right. And then the next step might be take that information and pump it into Salesforce to auto-populate Salesforce reports. So it's actually integrating with the repository where it's stored, bringing that information, analyzing it, and we can take that information and actually put it back in different workflows for clients in different systems.
And it sounds like your tool is a little bit different than some out there already, because it seems to me a lot of the ones I've seen, you have to upload the data to the tool. That's not happening here, right?
Yeah. What we could do is we can integrate with, let's say a client has SharePoint, and they have PDF documents sitting in SharePoint going back 10 years. So what we can do, we can actually integrate with SharePoint, analyze those documents. Every time a client drops a document in SharePoint, it automatically gets analyzed by Evisort, and then they can log into Evisort and run custom reports for very, very sort of specific metadata fields on their documents inside of SharePoint. So you can use SharePoint as storage and Evisort for analytics.
Was that always the idea, to integrate with existing tools rather than upload the data to Evisort?
Definitely not. It was something that we learned by going to market, by working with clients. And when we started talking to Fortune 500 companies, we realized that to be a truly horizontal player in this market, you need to play well with existing systems. There are so many different business units that surround legal. There is the procurement function, and they're using ERP systems and procure-to-pay systems.
ERP?
ERP is Enterprise Resource Planning Systems. So think Oracle, think SAP. And the former chief product officer of SAP is one of our investors. And so we work closely to understand, hey, these are the different systems that surround legal. How do we make legal a catalyst for innovation? And how do we let legal be the department that runs the deep analytics because they know the contracts the best, but take those insights and make that available to the clients internally that they're serving.
We're going to take 5 away from our talk with Jerry because now it's time in the podcast for our Legal Tech Founder segment. But before we get to that, I wanted to let you know that Technically Legal is now available on Spotify. And as it has always been, you can also find us on other major podcast platforms like iTunes, Google, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. So if you want to subscribe, we hope you'll do so. If you like us enough, please leave us a good review. Also, if you want to get a hold of me, you can email me at cmain@percipient.co. That's C-M-A-I-N @percipient.co. And also, for every episode of Technically Legal, we have a dedicated page which can be found at tlpodcast.com. On the episode page, you can find links to some of the stuff our guests talk about and get more information about them. If you're looking to find out more, I encourage you to check out tlpodcast.com. In this Legal Tech Founder segment, we talked to Rain & Court founder Andy Klein. Andy is a former attorney who left the practice of law years ago to focus on more entrepreneurial pursuits, including investment funds, creating a marketing company, and of great interest to me, founding a brewery. Andy's latest venture is Rain & Court. That's a services automation platform for large law firms to launch apps in a safe environment. Think App Store for legal. To make life easier for both app developers and law firm users, Rain & Court uses containerization to implement apps. In a very rudimentary way, containerization is like plug and play. Containerization permits developers to put their apps into self-contained containers, complete with an internal operating system that can basically be plugged into any environment and used. Andy, thanks for being here today, and give us the elevator pitch for Rain & Court.
Rain & Court's building a technology platform aiming to help law firms speed their adoption of new technology. Main focus of the platform is to help lead a migration out of the data centers that today really dominate the infrastructure at large law firms and enable firms to move into cloud computing, but in a way that preserves for the firms control over security, data protection, privacy, and stability that they today enjoy in the data centers and hope to be able to maintain as they move into cloud computing. What that means essentially is getting the software vendor community to adopt a new deployment model to bring their applications to market in what's called a containerized format that allows a vendor to build a cloud application but deliver it in a container. That's why it's called containerization, that the law firms can basically take down and run in cloud computing environments, but environments that the law firms control and contract for at Amazon or Microsoft or a third-party cloud provider, but not require the law firms to take their content and disperse it out to dozens or hundreds of different SaaS environments where the cloud computing environment is bundled together with the application and remains under the control of each vendor.
And it's a consortium of law firms, is that right?
To launch the business, we formed a consortium of major law firms with the goal of, one, getting the firms to help us figure out what tools would help them manage this migration into the cloud, and two, to help communicate the benefits of containerization to the vendor community, because the vendors are also big winners here. If they can adopt the new architecture and the new model of deployment, they can save time and money. The law firms can save time and money, and the whole technology industry within the legal community can really rush ahead.
And how'd you come up with the idea?
Well, I started a number of companies over the years. One company I started about 14 years ago in the ad tech space wound up over the years as a participant, as a vendor on a platform that serves today the telco and hosting industry and solves many of the same problems that the legal profession and other industries are now looking at, but in that case for the telco industry. And as a vendor over many years on that platform, I saw many of the benefits of that sort of plumbing being provided on a centralized basis to both buyers and sellers of technology. The application of that idea to the legal tech sector sort of started when I looked out at the universe and sort of looking for something else to do. And like a lot of folks, became interested in the emerging possibilities of the new generation of AI technologies and found myself thinking a lot about the legal sector, looked out at the horizon and saw just an amazing array of new applications coming to market. And that's what sort of triggered the comparison to the experience in the telco industry that I had lived in over a decade or a decade and a half. Too many applications, all fighting for time and attention, each one a bespoke implementation and presenting separate, similar, but quite separate security and data protection issues. And so the idea of trying to build a service automation platform, you can think of it as an app store in many respects, that simplified and took pain and cost and risk out of deploying new technologies, just made a lot of sense to me.
You had an interest in the legal industry because you were an attorney by training in a prior life, right?
A long time ago, yeah. I spent about 6 years as a associate at Cravath, Swaine and Moore, but I jumped out the window in 1992 and then started the professional life as an entrepreneur a long time ago.
And you said that Rating Court kind of serves as an app store. Do you have apps up there already available? What's the process? If I want to develop an app, how do I get it on there? How do law firms join? What's the whole background there?
So there's nothing live yet. We have 19 law firms we're working with today that are planning to launch the platform, and we have about 70 application vendors that are in process of working towards having their apps available on the platform.
What types of apps, just in general?
Oh, it really spans the entire spectrum of legal technologies. Lots of AI and the machine learning, data analytics providers, the contract review, contract automation, lots of timekeeping and billing applications. Almost every facet of legal practice is being offered and addressed with new technologies, and they're all welcome. The law firms, particularly the large law firms where we've initially focused, are already today running between 300 and 800 applications, and it's going to grow and grow and grow.
So I've got a hypothetical for you. Let's say I'm a vendor. I've got a software company. It's SaaS-based. Why would I just not use my own instance of AWS rather than joining Rain Court? What do you tell that vendor or that SaaS company?
So the challenge you have is one of scale and relevance, such that the law firms can take the time and effort that's required today to get their own internal security and compliance people comfortable with your environment, comfortable with your ability to keep them informed when you change policies that will affect the security of their data. And then if it's a large law firm that has financial institutions as clients, then you need that law firm to take the time and effort to get permission of every client that has content trusted to that law firm that might wind up in your environment. And that's just a showstopper for almost all of the vendors. There are some exceptional vendors because they're so large and significant and they have so much credibility and experience that they're getting certified at the highest levels and they're getting blessed by every client that matters to a big firm. But that's a very, very high bar. Docker containers allow you to take exactly the same application you've built for your own SaaS environment and release it as essentially a single tenant version of the multi-tenant application you built, and let the law firm just figure out where they want to run it. And if they run it at AWS or at Microsoft or at Google Cloud, or they want to run it in their own data center, in their own cloud native environment, what do you care? Your value is the application logic. The law firms have a massive problem. They can't take content of a client and put it up in the cloud without permission from the client. So we're working with the law firms, one, to get permission for a few virtual private cloud environments that the law firms each would have complete contractual control over, stable, consistent regimes for security and data protection and privacy. And once those environments are approved, then any and all applications that are of interest to the law firm can be taken down once they're tested and run in that environment. So it's a massive removal of obstacles for the vendor.
You just said that it takes out a lot of barriers for the vendors, but it also takes some barriers out for the law firms because they could in turn, hire their own developers, hire their own AWS experts, create their own environment. But this is a way to streamline that process by working with Rain Court. Isn't that right?
Yeah, it absolutely. It streamlines the process in the sense that we're doing lots of the heavy lifting on testing the applications, evaluating the terms and conditions, standardizing the review of the applications. But on top of that, we have actually an automation platform that massively simplifies and reduces the amount of work that needs to be done to run and manage an environment loaded with Docker containerized applications. We call that the container orchestration. And essentially, we can already today take what would normally be about 8 hours of work to take a Docker container, scale it out. You build what's called a pod, which is how you configure a group of containers to work at the right scale based on the work you're trying to do through those applications. And we can, with complete automation and in 2 clicks, allow a law firm to take those containers already tested, configure them through a graphical user interface that makes it really easy, drag and drop, point and click, set some parameters, and then push the button. And what would today take about 8 hours of manual IT time to set up a new application, we have in a matter of seconds deployed to your servers of choice, whether they're Amazon, Google, in your own data center. And through the platform, you'll immediately see all the monitoring and health check data, and also the telemetry about the cost and the usage of the application, the cost and usage of the underlying infrastructure. And that feeds into the billing systems that the firms use, and the practice management system, so that they can actually begin to see and forecast how much it's going to cost if they use Kira to do this document review, or use another AI program to do a large amount of work on a litigation. We're giving them automation kit to be able to set that up, run it, see the actual costs, and even estimate those costs in a way. It's a lot of plumbing that will save huge amounts, we believe, time and effort by automating things that today, even if you had the expertise in-house, would still be very manual. And we're allowing them to run all of those applications in whatever private cloud environments they want to bring up, and move them around with just a few clicks.
That's really interesting and really innovative. If a law firm wants to learn more, or a vendor wants to learn more, how can they do that?
Well, they're welcome to send me an email, andy@rainincourt.com, and we're delighted to hear from both sides anytime.
Let's get back to our conversation with Jerry Ting, the founder of Evisort. The people at the Harvard Innovation Lab weren't the only people that were excited about Evisort. Jerry and his team just raised some big VC money to the tune of $5.4 million. And not just from any VC fund. Amity Ventures and Village Global kicked in money in the latest round. And Village Global has some big name tech people behind it. In fact, the biggest names: Bezos, Gates, and Zuckerberg.
We actually raised our first round of funding when I was a 3L. So my parents are pretty proud. I went to Harvard Law School, so they said, if you're not going to be a lawyer, you better have a pretty good plan. And so we actually had our first set of customers when I was a 3L, and raised our first round of funding. We raised $1 million from a venture capital firm in the Bay Area called Amity Ventures. And that group we're pretty proud of. One of the partners there is named Peter Bell, and he used to be at Highland as a partner there. And 2 other partners there is Patrick Ying and CJ Ream. And they're a mentor group for us. So we actually raised our pre-seed round with Amity Ventures while I was still in law school.
And how many rounds have you done?
We've done 2 rounds.
And you just had a big one with Village Global, right?
Yeah, Village Global, Amity Ventures, and Sarah Ventures. These 3 funds came together, and we put together a $4.5 million round.
So did Amity re-up?
Yeah, they co-led.
And so it's got some Village, I know, it's got some big name partners: Bill Gates, Bezos, even Zuckerberg, right?
That's right.
And so how did you get the interest of big VC fund like that? Because sometimes legal tech, although gaining traction, is not always sexy to a lot of the VC funds out there. So what did you guys do differently?
Back then, legal tech was not a space that VCs looked at as much. Right? We're talking about 2 years ago now, where I went out to the venture capital market and said, hey, I think that we can use AI for lawyers. And back then, this was before the large legal tech investments that we've seen recently. And so there was a lot of convincing that we had to do. I remember for one venture capital fund that we met, they actually went out and they called some CLOs that were their contacts. And a CLO of a very large company said, it will be never possible in my lifetime to use AI on contracts. And so there was resistance from the VCs early on. But as I went through and I said, hey, forget the word AI for a second, look at exactly the business process of what a lawyer is doing. This is what a lawyer does when he or she reviews a contract. They're going in, they're looking at terms. This is what a lawyer does when he or she's looking for a contract in a contract management system to support a business unit. They're going through SharePoint folders and they're looking for documents, and they're looking for the master agreement. They're looking for the amendments. They're looking for statements of work. And fundamentally, it's a search and find problem. When you break down a business process to that level, VCs understand. They've seen this done thousands of times before in other industries, they realized that what we're doing in the legal industry has been done successfully in other industries as well. And so it was convincing them on the idea that legal is ready, one, for adoption, and two, the technology that we're building can actually serve a business function.
So I guess you kind of answered the question I was just about to ask, though. You said it took some convincing. And I was going to say, you're not the only guy out there saying AI can help legal in many different levels. What was it that you think you did or made your pitch different to some of these VC funds that said, hey, I'm going to invest in Evisort?
It's the type of technology that we built. If you look at some other legal tech vendors that have done it very well, they put the burden of training the algorithms on their clients. And so what they're coming in is they're giving them a module where users can upload examples of clauses, and you give the system enough clauses, it starts to understand this is a change of control provision. But in that delivery model is actually the clients who are training the models, not the AI vendors. We flipped that model on its head. What we have done is we've actually gone out with our initial set of clients and worked with partners to get a very large proprietary data set. And we train the models so that for our clients, they can just log in as if they're opening a Salesforce account or a Google Drive account. They log in, they upload their contracts, and the analysis happens without them having to train. It's this pre-trained, out-of-the-box model that gets a lot of VCs excited because what you can start to see is patterns for virality. You can say, hey, we're going to work with 5 customers in the insurance industry, 5 customers in the real estate industry. And what we can do is we can build these models where we can go from 5 to 100 customers without much additional customization. And it's that kind of patterns of growth where VCs get pretty excited.
I like Jerry's take on a lot of things. I like the fact that he looks outside the legal industry to grow his business. And another thing I really appreciate about Jerry is that unlike many startups, Evisort actually made it a point to find real paying customers as they looked for money. They didn't follow the if you build it, they will come model that a lot of startups seem to pursue.
We were very lucky to be based in Boston. I think Boston has a innovation culture that much resembles the Bay Area. But what we did was we were actually sending out emails to companies in the Boston area, to chief legal officers. And some of them would come meet with us just out of curiosity. And so we were able to convince a handful of them to start being our first set of customers. And it's really with these customers, with their contracts and with actually deploying into a customer environment, where we learned so much about what is the value that we're bringing for our customers. And also, how do you do customer success? When a question comes up, how do you support them? How do you build in customizations on that customer's instance that you can use for other customers? So without our first couple of customers, we couldn't have built Evisort.
And while we're on the topic of customers, who's the sweet spot? Who do you target?
So we don't work with very small mom and pop companies. There are contract management systems out there where it's per user, and it could be like one person inside of a 5-person consulting company. That's not our customer. Our customers are usually companies with 200 employees or more and has a legal function. And beyond that, it actually starts to look quite similar. The way that companies look at contracts with one lawyer looking at vendor agreements versus a company that has maybe 50,000 employees may be slightly different because that's usually a procurement function, but the data fields that they're looking at is actually quite similar. Our first client was a 500-person civil engineering firm in North Dakota.
That's interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah, so innovation from an adoption perspective is happening all around the world. I talk to CEOs of legal tech companies in Brazil, in Europe, and other parts of the world, and we're seeing innovation happening and adoption happening all around the world. I really think it's that golden age of legal tech. From that company to now, we're starting to work with some of the largest organizations in the world that are multinational. Everyone has data and contracts, and there's different fields that they may want to track. But at the end of the day, it's a document with words on it.
As I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, Jerry always has one foot firmly secured in legal, but is always looking outward to other industries as he tries to grow his business. Obviously, legal is very important to Jerry, and his company spends most effort talking to and trying to generate interest with chief legal officers. But Evisort also sees the value of its legal tech tool for uses outside the corporate legal department.
Potential customer that came to us. The customer was the head of innovation at one of the 3 largest banks, investment banks in the United States. And she emailed us on our website. This was, I think we're 6 months into the company. And she said, hey, can you come to our bank and help us analyze loan documents? And I said, sure. We've seen loan documents before. Some of these are actually publicly available. And so we can build a training data set. And I asked her, I said, which department, are you calling from? And she said, I'm calling out of the innovation department. And I said, what's the innovation department? She says, well, I report to both the CIO and the CFO. And the people that are going to be using this are actually, folks on the sales floor who are negotiating deals live with customers. It's actually before those loan documents even get to legal. And that got me thinking. It's not just the lawyers who are looking at contracts. Sales folks are negotiating contracts on the sales side. It goes into sales operations, which is a whole separate function. It goes in for legal approval, procurement approval on the vendor side. And then it goes into finance and then legal again all over. And it's a cycle that happens. And so why only build a tool that supports legal? Why not build a tool that can go across the enterprise, but is driven most of the times by legal because they have the domain knowledge and have the legal expertise on contracts? And this actually takes legal and puts them into the spotlight, because now some of our clients that are coming on now, it's actually the CEO with the CLO who are buying Evisort. And that's a huge shift in our industry.
Yeah, I agree. Tech's tech, why limit it? You keep mentioning CLOs. I mean, is that the main people you target when you're going out?
We speak to a lot of CLOs.
Yeah.
Yeah, CLOs, AGCs.
And how often are they saying, well, innovation's not my thing. You got to talk to someone else in the legal department or talk to procurement or...
It happens. It varies. It's kind of a personality thing at
Right.
that point. But most of the times, I think in 2019, they've read articles about this industry. They've maybe seen podcasts like this one. And so they're at least curious. Very rarely do we say, hey, we have an AI solution. And then the lawyer says, we don't care about AI.
Right.
The CLO might say, hey, tell me about what it does at a high level. How does it help me from a reporting, from a forecasting perspective? And okay, you're talking about specific fields. Here is this person on my team who's an expert on NDAs or services agreements. Can you set up a call with them? And then we do a call with them. And then they usually bring the CLO back in and say, hey, we're interested in moving forward. Let's talk about go forward steps.
Well, hey, man, I appreciate your time. If people want to learn more about your company, where do they find you?
We're actually launching a new website with a ton of information on features, how our technology works, customer success. So go to evisort.com, or also add me on LinkedIn. I post regularly about legal tech. I know most of the journalists in the space and a lot of the other CEOs. And so follow me, Jerry Ting, Ting, on LinkedIn, and I look forward to connecting.
Well, that's it for another edition of Technically Legal. Appreciate you listening. As I mentioned, if you want to subscribe, you can check us out on Spotify, iTunes, Google, and other major podcasting platforms. If you want to get a hold of me or learn more about my company, you can email me at cmain@percipient.co. That's CMAIN@percipient.co. If you want to learn more about our guests or find out more about some of the stuff they talked about, you can check out the episode page at tlpodcast.com. Again, thanks for listening, and this has been Technically Legal.